There is brand new explosive reporting today on how the Pentagon is now struggling to deal with survivors of their boat strikes in the Caribbean, a practice which is already under intense scrutiny because of the September 2nd strikes that killed 2 survivors. From that new reporting in the New York Times, based on interviews with multiple officials, quote, Pentagon officials largely kept State Department counterparts in the dark about strike operations, then scrambled to try to enlist diplomats to help deal with survivors, whom military officials referred to by specific terms that included, quote, distressed mariners. That phrase is usually used in a peacetime and civilian context. The talks took place after the first attack on September 2nd, when the U.S. military killed 2 survivors with a second strike. The New York Times reports that Pentagon lawyers made an extraordinary suggestion regarding the 2 survivors from an October strike. Quote, they asked whether the 2 survivors could be put into a notorious prison in El Salvador, to which the Trump administration had sent hundreds of Venezuelan deportees, 3 officials said. The State Department lawyers were stunned. One official said and rejected the idea. That brand new reporting underscores just how important any investigative effort by Congress would be. It's the kind of alarming new reporting in detail about these strikes in the Caribbean that has had lawmakers across the political spectrum clamoring for answers and accountability. Here's what members of Donald Trump's own political party have been saying in the wake of news reporting about that second strike.
I think what we have heard shocked us all. And I think most would say that when you have 2 individuals that are literally floating in the water, a second order to kill them all is not something that we would consider within the rules of war.
Obviously, if that occurred, that would be very serious, and I agree that would be an illegal act. That is not the legal opinion or the information or the legal justification. The acts that have been described to Congress that are being undertaken in this, there are very serious concerns in Congress about the attacks on the so-called drug boats down in the Caribbean and the Pacific, and the legal justification that's been provided.
Secretary Hicks said he had no knowledge of this and it did not happen. It was fake news. It didn't happen. And then the next day from the podium of the White House, they're saying it did happen. So either he was lying to us on Sunday or he's incompetent and didn't know it had happened.
Now, that wasn't the Republican Party line 9 years ago when things were less weird and more normal, or 4 years ago when we had a different president, a different party. That was the Republican Party line 10 days ago. But now, the chair of the House Armed Services Committee, Republican Congressman Mike Rogers, is reversing course, pretending none of that happened, and saying this about his committee's investigation into the boat strikes. Quote, it's done. I've got all the answers I needed, end quote. Rogers' new position comes about despite the fact that the Trump administration has yet to publicly release a legal justification or the written orders for the strike or the mission. All those things were due to Congress months ago, or even the video of the second strike on September 2nd, in which survivors of the first strike who were shipwrecked were killed. Now, his backtracking also comes about despite the fact that U.S. action in the region is very much ongoing. Donald Trump in the last hour announced himself that the United States of America has seized an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela.
We've just seized a tanker on the coast of Venezuela, large tanker, very large. Largest one ever seized, actually. And other things are happening, so you'll be seeing that later, and you'll be talking about that later with some other people.
America's just seized the, quote, largest tanker ever seized, and according to Donald Trump, other things are happening as well. Joining our coverage, retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Dan Maurer. He served as an active duty officer and as a judge advocate. He is currently a professor of law at Ohio Northern University. With me at the table, host of the Independent Americans podcast, the founder and CEO of Independent Veterans of America, Paul Rieckhoff, is back with us. Let me start with you, Paul. What do you make of this moment for the military?
You and I have talked for months about this. I think the biggest story in the world is that Donald Trump can do anything he wants with the most powerful military the world has ever seen, and nothing is stopping him. That includes now seizing oil tankers. It includes potentially killing survivors. It includes potential black sites. I mean, he is all gas and no brakes right now. And when I spoke to you a couple weeks ago, I said the pieces were in place for a strike on Venezuela. It was just a matter of when. This is a significant escalation today. I mean, oil prices are up. The world is going to wonder if this is why he wants Venezuela, for the oil. And our troops are staged all over the region. They're in Puerto Rico. We had F-18s 20 miles from the Gulf. So it looks like this is happening. And most of the country doesn't.
What's this?
Some kind of a strike on Venezuela, an escalation of military action against Venezuela.
Like troops on the ground in Venezuela?
He said he would. That's on the table. The pieces are there if he wants to do that. He can do limited airstrikes. He can do an amphibious assault. He has the entire spectrum at his disposal right now, and he said he will go that far. And I think it's really important to underscore, Congress does not support this and hasn't authorized it. Most of the country doesn't support this and isn't behind it, and he's still going full speed. So I think the country needs to ask everybody to put the brakes on here, because there is nothing more important than a potential regime change war just in time for Christmas.
What does it mean, in your view, that after Republicans took, and this is only extraordinary in the context of Trump being president, obviously I worked for a Republican president, and it was commonplace for members of his own party to, on a daily basis, attack and criticize and question the conduct of the wars the country was engaged in, and that was healthy, that was good. But in the context of this moment with Donald Trump, it's extraordinary for Republicans to have said what we just played, which was Senator Murkowski, Congressman Turner, and Senator Rand Paul. What does it mean that Mike Turner is pulling the rug out from under what they said 10 days ago? Mike Rogers.
It's cowardly. It's a slap in the face to the American public, and it's a slap in the face to our troops, because transparency is absolutely necessary before you send men and women to combat, and they're already being put in harm's way. So this switcheroo they're doing on the tapes, release the tapes. If there's nothing to hide, release the tapes, release all the tapes, not just for that one strike in question, but for all the strikes, and let's let the American people see, and let's just let our troops see. Let's let our armed forces men and women understand, because there's also Signalgate, where this week Hegseth was found to have violated good protocol. He's using his personal cell phone and using Signal to communicate classified information that could have gotten people killed. So the real question is, you already got troops in harm's way. Now you want to put more in harm's way? How can our troops trust any of them on this?
Dan, it's interesting that this new report in the New York Times has the description of distressed mariners. We've talked a lot over the last 2 weeks about how this is the example in the textbook of where the line is in the book about the law of war. And it seems that even inside the Trump administration, they use the term distressed mariners. That's a quote from the Trump administration to describe survivors of strikes.
Right. And I think it's important to reemphasize again and again and again that the laws of war don't apply here, frankly, because we're not at war with these cartels, at least not officially, not formally, not in any way that the law understands a war to be happening. So the laws of war, if they applied, if this were truly an international armed conflict or a non-international armed conflict with cartels, then it would be clearly a war crime. As you said, a textbook war crime, killing shipwreck survivors. No matter how bad they were, they are what called hors de combat, or out of the fight. But it's not an armed conflict, therefore the laws of war don't apply. But that doesn't matter either, because under any law, any legal regime, killing unarmed people, whether they're criminals or not, is a crime. There's no due process. There's no arrest, investigation, trial, prosecution, sentence. It's just an extrajudicial killing, no matter what you call them. Criminals, distressed mariners, combatants, whatever. It's a crime, period.
Let me ask you, Dan, what is your sense of how much trouble they knew they were in when you start to piece together the timeline? So the second strike on September 2nd is the video that has been shown to a small handful of lawmakers. But I want to go back and read from this Times story, because it pulls us through to the end of October, 2 months later, where they're still struggling to deal with survivors, shipwreck criminals, as you write in USA Today. Let me read this. On October 29th, Pentagon officials convened a session about boat strike survivors, a video conference involving dozens of American diplomats from across the Western Hemisphere. The message was that any rescued survivors should be sent back to their home countries or to a third country, said 3 other officials, who, like others interviewed for this article, spoke anonymously to discuss internal deliberations. Behind that policy was a quieter goal to ensure survivors did not end up in the U.S. judicial system, where court cases could force the administration to show evidence justifying Trump's military campaign in the region. What is this consciousness of a policy that wouldn't withstand the scrutiny of the U.S. judicial system say to you?
This dancing around and trying to concoct after the fact different legal frameworks for describing these individuals and for coming up with different courses of action to deal with them, repatriating them or killing them, suggests to me 2 things. One, it's either pure incompetence because they hadn't planned for the fact that there might be survivors of these missile strikes. What do we do with survivors clinging to the hull of a capsized ship? Any competent military planner would have thought through that and had a plan for dealing with that other than simply firing another missile at them, because that would have been blatantly unlawful and was blatantly unlawful. The second thing it tells me, and as a former prosecutor, I would call this consciousness of guilt. They know that this would not withstand scrutiny. Because it simply cannot. There are few cases that I've ever dealt with or ever seen where the illegality is so clear on its face. And to shield the videos from the public, from most members of Congress, to say that, for the congressman to say earlier, I've seen enough, I'm satisfied. Well, if you're that confident, then show the tapes to everybody. Be transparent about it.
Can I just note, Senator Blumenthal, that the president has particularly had a history of talking about Venezuela and its oil. In his first term, he floated, frankly, that countries in crisis and turmoil that were oil rich should have their oil reserves taken over. There was a Washington Post article today that came out just this evening that talked about how he seized a tanker that was headed for, that had oil that was going to Iran at one point in the first administration. When you heard this news from the president today in the Oval Office, what did you immediately think? Have you all been briefed? Do you know any additional information than what we were able to play in that clip?
We have no formal briefing that we've been provided, so the information available to me is pretty much what I am reading and hearing informally. But clearly, this seizure of an oil tanker with Venezuelan oil, even if it is a tanker that has illegally shipped Iranian oil in the past, and therefore they've gotten a seizure warrant to take into custody, is still a significant escalation in the pressure campaign against Venezuela. So it is, again, a step toward possible conflict without any authorization from Congress. The idea that there is armed conflict here and it justifies either seizing the tanker or going against the boats in the Caribbean that they've been striking, 23 of them, killing more than 80 people, is really one that cries out for scrutiny. And that's why I've called for a subpoena of all the records, documents, videos, and after-action reports, because what we're seeing here is a cover-up. The lack of full transparency is deeply troubling. Well,
pulling on that a little bit more, Senator, and certainly bringing in as an example of why this should be concerning, as you mentioned, the Iranian seizure of oil seizure and all of those pieces that sort of create a narrative, a necessary narrative for the U.S. Senate and the Congress, the House, to play a more active role here. This president and this administration, whether you're talking about the indiscriminate killing of 80-some people in these boats that are supposedly run by, narco terrorists, as the president claimed, without evidence, no presentation before your committee or any other committee of that evidence, no explanation to the American people. We can't get a video of anything. They show us a little bit of a video today, but is that the whole story? So the points you're making are incredibly important at this, I think, inflection point, where this is not just an escalation militarily, but it's also a de-escalation, as I see it, of the role and authority that the Congress should be playing right now.
And it is part of a pattern, and your point is extremely well taken. The pattern is ceding authority, abrogating responsibility. The House chairman of their Armed Services Committee announced yesterday that he thought they were done. Right. No need to investigate.
Right.
Really?
Nothing to see here.
No, nothing to see here.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah. I mean, no there there. Well, if there's no there, if nothing wrong happened, why not compel, absolutely required, full disclosure? There is no reason to conceal sources and methods. There's no excuse for this kind of cover-up that we're seeing in real time. And the point that you make about Congress exercising its responsibility, it's not only that we want to see stuff because it would be interesting or curious. The American people deserve to see it. It's our taxpayer money that's going into striking these military boats. And they killed 2 people who were clinging to debris, trying to survive in action that could constitute either murder or a war crime. So there's a potential criminal culpability. There has to be full disclosure, and the excuses they're giving right now for this cover-up are completely unfounded.
Right. Well, the New York Times has some great reporting about that, Senator. Let me read you just a little bit of what they have here. The message was that any rescued survivors should be sent back to their home countries or to a third party, said 3 officials. This is about those who survived some of these strikes. Behind that policy was a quieter goal, to ensure survivors did not end up in the U.S. judicial system, where court cases could force the administration to show evidence justifying President Trump's military campaign in the region. Legal cases in the United States involving survivors would force the administration to present more information to try to back up its rationale for the attacks. As we learn more about the conversation that the Pentagon has been having with the State Department about what they would potentially do with survivors, I'm sure you read the same reporting I did. One of the ideas that was floated by the Pentagon was like, well, why don't we just send these survivors to CCOT, to the notorious Salvadoran prison? The folks at State balked at that ridiculous idea. They dismissed it out of hand. It's how you've ended up with at least 2 survivors repatriated to their home country. But the fact that this administration says they're going after criminals, but then they don't want to actually prosecute those supposed criminals in the U.S. justice system, what does that tell you about their end goal here?
That point is really compelling, because the 2 survivors who were sent back to their home countries, Colombia and Ecuador, were in effect shipwrecked. They were rescued by a helicopter, much as 6 weeks earlier, 2 survivors were clinging to the debris of a boat that had been struck and destroyed. So the question is why they felt they could rescue the 2 people on October 16th and kill the 2 on September 2nd. And you have to believe that they had to be wrong in one instance or another, and almost certainly they were wrong to kill those people, those 2 survivors. The other point that's very interesting here is that we're talking here about a supposed campaign against narco-terrorists. You know, I'm against terrorists and I'm against trafficking of drugs. And the best way to counter it, if you really want to do law enforcement, is to interdict them, as they did those 2 survivors on October 16th, and then interrogate them, imprison them, prosecute them. That wasn't done in either case, and it sort of shows the hypocrisy, which again is evident in the pardoning of the Honduran drug kingpin who was sentenced to 45 years, Hernandez, who was let go. And the whole thing is so fraught with absolute lies and hypocrisy.
This is I'm very concerned. I think, again, the people that watch this show are like, is there going to be a night where Simone is not concerned? Perhaps, baby, but it ain't today. This is from Bloomberg about the seized oil tanker. Earlier today. They write, the U.S. action may make it much harder for Venezuela to export its oil, as other shippers are now likely to be more reluctant to load its cargoes. Most Venezuelan oil goes to China, usually through intermediaries at steep discounts, owing to sanctions risk. I say that because I think it's going to be very important for people to listen to what the administration says is the justification for why they seize this oil tanker. Much like the boat strikes, I think we need to know what is the legal justification for this. What is on that, who or what was on the boat that made you feel as though we had to do this? If they say the oil was going to Iran, well, I believe Bloomberg, and much of Bloomberg says much oil goes to China. So is this oil going to Iran? I think that the American people should understand that what the government is doing is gaslighting us so that there is confusion while they are actually carrying out some very nefarious activity. And my question is, to what end and why? What are they really doing?
And the American people have no way of knowing unless they are shown that legal opinion. I've reviewed it. It's classified, that supposedly justifies killing people on those boats that supposedly are transmitting narcotics, but we have no facts, none have been revealed, that show who is driving the boats, who's financing them, where they're heading, what they're carrying, and the cover-up. And by the way, I don't use that term lightly. You know, the concealment here is a through line. It goes to the tanker, it goes to the small boats that are running supposedly narcotics, it goes to the Epstein files. Concealment is the watchword and the mantra here. And that's why I think Congress, going to Michael's point, has to play a much more aggressive role, has to demand the kind of information. And we've taken a baby step. You know, in the National Defense Authorization Act, they inserted a provision that says we're going to withhold 1/4 of Hegseth's travel funds. That is a baby step. It's
25%.
More symbolic than real. And you know the way the Pentagon operates, they'll move funds around.
Some of the richest billionaires and companies in the world now battling over buying the Warner Brothers empire, and possibly CNN as well. It's a high-stakes clash which has Hollywood and Washington riveted. The Ellison family, Trump allies, jumping in now with this whopping $108 billion hostile bid to try to get Warner and CNN. The famed studio had basically accepted the outline from Netflix in principle, but the story is far from over. Warner Brothers must consider all offers and ultimately get past any DOJ monopoly concerns. Lawmakers are already concerned on that front. Any new combined company will have more power over the information and media ecosystem. And many creatives and democracy advocates warn against this type of consolidation. There's criticism and concerns about corporate greed, which could be bad for creatives and for market competition, depending on who you ask. The bidding war is so expensive that even the richest firms in the world, like Netflix, one of the Magnificent Seven biggest stocks in our entire economy, they still need extra money for this deal. Netflix taking bank financing, the Ellison Group I mentioned taking some controversial potential money from Gulf states, and tapping a walking conflict of interest in Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. All of this has drawn jokes from a comic who, remember, is still employed by the Paramount company that the Ellisons bought.
My beloved parent company, Paramount, reportedly launched a hostile takeover bid for Warner Brothers valued at $108 billion. Wow. I got to say, if my company's got that kind of green, I'm sure they can afford to uncancel one of their best shows. Their bid includes $24 billion from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Abu Dhabi wealth funds. And when the dictator of Saudi Arabia gives you billions of dollars, I'm sure there's no catch.
No catch, right? Just a little friendly international business. TBD. But if there is another catch here that's getting a lot of attention, it's that Donald Trump clearly wants CNN to go to new owners and to change. He admits his demands to censor and distort coverage at all kinds of places. He's sued outlets, as you know. He's demanded changes at CBS, which is now owned by that company, and has demanded programming changes at CNN if his friends get a hold of it. Remember, Trump has attacked any press that's critical. He's taken Shoot the Messenger to new levels. He's currently still suing the Fox News sister outlet, the Wall Street Journal, over reports about Epstein that have been verified, that are not really in doubt. He's tried to sue the Messenger, getting strong-arm settlements from those media companies, and he's tried to cancel the Messenger in the failed bid to get Jimmy Kimmel fired. So he's shooting away. But what you see now is he has billionaire allies literally also trying to buy the Messenger. Now remember, the government is barred from abusing powers like regulation to control free speech. Yet Trump wants his billionaire ally to get a hold of CNN over the other corporate bidders. He said today it's imperative that CNN be sold. He said because, quote, I think the people running CNN right now are corrupt or incompetent. The politician wants to pull the strings of the free press, which is a problem as old as the founding of this country, which is why of all the amendments, the first one is about preventing would-be autocrats from doing just that. And Trump's long obsession over his legacy media coverage, these messengers, shows as well that some of these outlets do still matter, even if they face more competition from streaming and podcasts and the internet, even if there's pressure on their long-term revenue models, which could include all television, including the one you're watching. But it is a problem for free speech if big government can crush the free market to pick winners and losers, or worse, to punish dissent and honest journalism. Even Trump knows that doing that or being seen to do that is still very unpopular. So while I just read you one time recently where today he's saying, you know, he'd like CNN under different management, when it comes to overseeing this potential merger, he still claims the free market should prevail, saying he wants Warner to go to the highest bidder and he's neutral on who buys what. That's a report from veteran insider Matt Bellany for Puck, who also notes the contradiction, adding, please stop laughing. And Matt Bellany is our special guest on this big story. He's known for his must-read Hollywood newsletter and podcast, The Town, drawing on his experience as editor of the famed Hollywood Reporter and as an entertainment lawyer. In fact, many Hollywood moguls, actors, and creatives hang on his reporting, so much so that he became a kind of meta inside joke on the very insidery Apple show The Studio, appearing as himself.
Matt Bellany, hi! Hi! How's it going? My favorite entertainment journalist, how are you?
My favorite up-and-coming executive.
I am a huge fan of the podcast. Okay, bye-bye.
Good luck with the presentation.
Matt, thanks for being here.
Wow, that was my Emmy clip. Thank you very much for showing that. Sadly, I was snubbed.
It's all meta in a way, but you're really in this, and I mentioned your reporting because you've really charted this long before it hit the front pages and the politics. Let's start with what you reported about the president and the free speech and free market battles here. Your thoughts?
It's really interesting that Trump isn't even saying it quietly. He's saying it out loud. He wants CNN under a new owner, plain and simple. And the interesting thing that's going on right now is there's only one company looking to buy the division that includes CNN, and that is the Ellisons and Paramount. Larry Ellison, the second richest man in the world, very good friends with Donald Trump. David Ellison, he has said very positive things about. He just took over the Paramount studio. Netflix doesn't want CNN. They don't want the TV division. So if they buy the company, it will be spun out into a new division, and there will be others potentially that will come after it, or it will just be a publicly traded company with all the TV stuff. So it's very interesting Trump is saying that now about him wanting new ownership there.
You think about streaming, distribution, and sort of the chain of that process more than most people in Washington and viewers who we know we like to watch Netflix, we flip around. You really study this. And so I'm curious, do you have a view based on the evidence, I know you're fair, about which deal is better for what we might call independent and diverse media?
It's a fascinating question because it depends entirely how you define the market. Are we defining the market here as the streaming universe, just the streamers? Because if this deal goes through with Netflix, Netflix will have a huge chunk of the market for streaming because they'll be able to bolt HBO Max onto Netflix, which already has 300 million subscribers worldwide. It would give them about 450 million subscribers worldwide. But if you are Netflix and you are trying to define the market as anybody who watches television and time spent watching video, that includes YouTube, that includes linear networks like this one, that includes TikTok. And when you define it that way, even this deal would give Netflix a pretty small share of overall time spent watching video.
Well, let's jump. I'm going to let you finish, but just on your point about what Netflix could be, you know, in politics, when sometimes they say, oh, you know, this candidate was best when they were themselves. They'll say, you know, let Al Gore be Al Gore, and you get a better earnest version of a boring nerd than Al Gore trying to be something else. And Netflix is now making the argument, well, HBO, which a lot of people love over the years, I mean, a lot of great shows, they say, well, we'll let HBO be HBO. We won't try what's currently happening, which is to broaden them to be everything to everyone. We've seen some creatives say, oh, interesting, and other creatives say, no, they don't trust consolidation. What's your view on that argument?
You know, it's very hard to determine whether what is being said now is going to be what's true once this deal closes, especially when you start to talk about year 2, year 4, year 6, year 10, whether the model will change and they're thinking long-term here now, oh yeah, we'll keep HBO separate, but then a couple of quarters of bad growth and all of a sudden they start to merge and then we wake up in 5 years and HBO is gone. Because once the deal closes, if there are not conditions placed on this deal from the government that mandate things stay the same or things change, who knows what is going to happen.
Are we in a golden era of TV and content, or are we in this sort of doomsday scenario that, I mean, so, as you know, some of the creatives and the labor side are very concerned?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it depends who you talk to. If you talk to people in Hollywood right now, it is a doomsday scenario. The peak TV days are over, where all of these streaming services were trying to grow, and there was still a really robust ecosystem of great content on the linear channels. Now, most of the cable channels, most of the broadcast channels have gotten rid of their original programming except for sports and news, and the streaming services are still growing and they have billions of dollars worth of content every year, but they're not growing at the same pace as they were during that peak TV era. So the content creators in the community are really feeling a downsizing moment. On the consumer side, I think most people would say there's still a lot to watch out there, but who knows, with there's consolidation and 4 studios instead of 6 as we had a decade ago, and these streaming services have a incentive to really coalesce around each other and consolidate, maybe the market for this kind of content will continue to decline.
Yeah. On the pursuit, I mean, I've told viewers, everyone remembers Elon Musk for all the reasons. I don't think David Ellison and his son are the same household names. But you can think of them as the other kind of top 5 richest people in the world working with Trump. Some of the reporting from the journals talks about there was a relentless campaign by the Ellison Paramount faction. They started this whole thing off, and Ellison offered assurances to Trump officials, reportedly, that if he bought Warner, he'd make sweeping changes to CNN, that he would magify it. And Trump got some headway on that in the tech space. So I guess my question to you, as someone who talks to everybody, is are they not as good at this as they claim to be? How is it that they started this, didn't get it, now they're on their back foot offering $108 billion, and according to the texts that are in the filing, maybe more? Are they not good at this, Matt?
I mean, for the record, if you talk to people at Paramount, they say that no explicit promises have been made to Trump, and he tends to overstate these kinds of things. But I think Paramount really underestimated Netflix. They did not.
Well, we just saw another very positive election night for Democrats. In Georgia yesterday, Democrats managed to flip a state House seat in a special election in a district that Trump won by double digits last year. In Florida, Democrats won House District 90 by more than 20 percentage points. And in Miami, well, Dems saw one seismic flip.
For the first time in nearly 3 decades, a Democrat has won the race for mayor in Miami. Eileen Higgins beat Republican Emilio Gonzalez, who was endorsed by President Trump. She won 59% of the vote. Affordability has been a key issue throughout the campaign.
Keep in mind, Miami is one of the places where we had seen what was kind of billed as a permanent realignment of Latino voters away from Democrats towards Republicans and MAGA. And it's true, that was really the story in both the 2020 and 24 presidential races. You see those big red arrows in South Florida showing how much voters were moving, Latino voters, in that direction. Last night, that realignment seemed to fall apart. I mean, in one of the most famously conservative Latino majority cities in the country, a Democrat defeated a Trump-endorsed Republican to win the race for Miami mayor for the first time in nearly 30 years. And if that sort of thing is happening nationwide, if those are the sorts of seats, all kinds of seats could be in play next year, including in the state of Texas, which has been a kind of white whale for Democrats for literally generations now. Last night, I spoke to Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett about her bid for Senate in a Democratic primary that is quickly heating up. Joining us now is the other Democrat running for U.S. Senate in Texas, State Representative James Tallarico. It's good to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
I want to put these maps up. So I want to show the shift in Florida, which we just showed. This is Latino voters. And we know because of the area, right? So South Florida, obviously big Hispanic population there. Now, this is the 2020 election. Look at this 2020 voter shift in Texas. Which was the other big part on the map that really jumped out. Those enormous red arrows there at the bottom in the Rio Grande Valley. That was really a place where this is, again, an election that Trump lost, right? That Biden won, but we saw that realignment moving. How do you think about those voters and the voters of Texas, what you have to do to win this state that has been so impossible for Democrats to carry statewide?
Well, I'm an 8th generation Texan. My family's been in the state since it was Mexico. And my family is from South Texas. My mom grew up in Laredo, right there on the Texas-Mexico border. And I get the sense that voters down in South Texas feel betrayed by both political parties. The National Democratic Party took communities like the Rio Grande Valley for granted for far too long. And so those voters were open to an alternative. Republican politicians came to town and made big promises. They promised to lower the cost of everything. They promised to put working families first. They promised to drain the swamp. And that sounded pretty good, including to some of my family members in South Texas who voted for Donald Trump in the last election. But just 1 year later, everything is more expensive. Working families are falling further behind, and corruption in Washington is the worst it's ever been. Those Republican politicians made big promises, but they delivered more of the same. So they fumbled the ball. But that doesn't mean the ball is going to run itself into the end zone. That is incumbent upon us as Texas Democrats, incumbent upon our campaign to make the case to these voters, to connect with these voters, persuade them to join us in this effort to stop the extremism and corruption that we're seeing in Washington.
You said the phrase, us as Texas Democrats. I've covered the Texas Democratic Party for a long time, and I've done reporting in Texas and know the state relatively well. Obviously, quite famously, right? It's like the Chicago Cubs, right? Before 2016, right? Like it's one of the most famous sort of iconic losing streaks in politics. Yeah. Haven't carried a statewide race since Ann Richards, right? If I'm not mistaken. Right. It's now going on, 30 plus years. Right. Why are you going to be the person to break that streak?
Well, we're going to do it as a team. It's not going to be one person. When you zoom out and you look at statewide elections in Texas, they've gotten more competitive, not less, over the last 15, 20 years. When I was growing up in Texas, Republicans would win by 25, 30 points. Now they consistently win by single digits. I think it's going to be incumbent upon all of us to do the work in communities like South Texas to persuade these voters to join us in our fight against extremism and corruption. And our campaign is building a movement in Texas. We have shattered grassroots fundraising records in the state. We have recruited more than 10,000 volunteers who, as you and I speak, are out there doing the work to win voters over and to flip this state. And that's the kind of infrastructure, the kind of effort we need to energize Democratic voters, bring in new voters, and peel people off from the other side. You have to do all three if you're going to win a seat like Texas Senate.
I want to play a little video your campaign put out talking about expense, cost of living. Obviously, we were just talking about that earlier in the program. Take a listen.
Thanks to tariffs, everything costs more, a lot more. These deep-fried Oreos cost $14. They used to cost $6. This funnel cake chicken sandwich used to be $9, now it's $15. So when you walk into the voting booth next November, remember this $25 turkey leg.
I like this also, sort of a subtle. Zoran Mondani did a very famous video about halalflation. This is like a Texas version of that. I thought it was interesting. How central do you think this issue is to the campaign? And also, what can you as a U.S. Senator do about it? Because it strikes me as one of these issues where if you're the out party, it's very easy to run against. And if you're the party in governance, it's really hard to deal with prices.
So I got elected to the state house by flipping a Trump district, a district that no one thought was winnable. And I'm now in my 4th term as a state representative. And I've been able to not just stop bad Republican bills, I've been able to work across the aisle to pass bills that do bring down costs, bringing down the cost of childcare, which is now more expensive than college in the state of Texas, bringing down the cost of housing. I just passed a big housing bill that's going to allow for us to build single-stair housing complexes in Texas. I passed a major bill to bring down prescription drug costs, importing cheap prescription drugs from Canada right into Texas. And I passed the first ever cap on insulin copays in state history. So there are things we can do to address the structural costs in our economy that are holding working families back. I will just say, though, if we're going to do that, we have to tackle corruption, too, because it's a corrupt, broken political system that is preventing our leaders in Washington from restructuring the economy to work for regular people.
Since you talk about corruption, let's talk a little bit about the other side of the aisle here. This is a fascinating race, and I think lots of people are watching very closely in Republican circles because there is this primary.
Right.
It's now a 3-way primary, including Wesley Hunt, Texas Congressman Cornyn, and Ken Paxton. What do you think? What is your view of that primary and what it means for what the race is going to be if you have someone who isn't a sitting senator, if say Ken Paxton wins and you can't sort of run against the guy who's sitting there in Washington?
Neither John Cornyn nor Ken Paxton deserve the honor of representing our great state in our nation's capital. Both of them are far more interested in representing their billionaire mega donors than representing the people of Texas. They both sold us out time and time again. Ken Paxton's crimes are well known. I was part of the bipartisan majority in the Texas House that impeached our corrupt attorney general. But you're not going to believe me when I say this, but I think John Cornyn may be even more corrupt than Ken Paxton because he was the deciding vote on that big, ugly bill, that big, ugly bill that's going to kick millions of Texans off their health care. It's going to take food out of the mouths of hungry Texas children, all to give another tax break to his donors. We oftentimes think corruption is something that's illegal, like in Ken Paxton's case, but corruption is really just the betrayal of the public's trust. It is the abuse of your public office. And so John Cornyn has forfeited his right to represent all of us in our nation's capital, and that is what I'm running against. This is not a red team versus blue team thing. This is all of us coming together to demand that we have a government that works for us and not the ultra-rich.
You're in the Texas State House where you have to vote on legislation. The other woman who's running in this primary, Jasmine Crockett, had her last night. She's in the House of Representatives, so she's voting on federal legislation now. I want to ask you about a vote today, the National Defense Authorization Act. It passed with a big bipartisan majority, about half Democrats for, half against, a slight majority against. Jasmine Crockett voted against that bill. How would you have voted today?
Well, again, I got my hands full with the work that I'm doing in the State House, and I think anyone who knows me knows that I'm a policy wonk. I'd dig into the details of every bill. I have deliberate conversations with stakeholders, with constituents. Haven't done any of that work on this particular issue. But I will tell you that I get the sense across the state of Texas that people are deeply concerned with the direction of our foreign policy. You know, Donald Trump got elected promising peacetime, and he has delivered the exact opposite. And I think this is actually going to be a major issue in this upcoming race. And I look forward to articulating that vision for a safer foreign policy for people in Texas and across this country.
Yeah, on the policy wonk thing, I will note the single stair thing for the housing nerds out there. It's a big. It's in.
People should look it up.
It's a great bill. Basically, the short version is that Europe builds a lot of single stair apartment buildings. Our fire codes require 2. It makes buildings more expensive. It's less space for them. There's a lot of people who think it's just as safe to build with single stairs. So.
It is, and most other countries around the world do it, and we're now going to do it in Texas.
All right, Texas State Rep James Tallarico. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me.